20th century, America, a land of dreams, was also a land of grave contradictions. Amidst prosperity and innovation, the nation was deeply marred by racial segregation and systemic racism. Amidst prosperity and innovation, the nation was deeply marred by racial segregation and systemic racism. Amidst prosperity and innovation, the nation was deeply marred by racial segregation and systemic racism. The Jim Crow laws, a set of oppressive policies, enforced racial segregation, and African Americans were victims of widespread discrimination. Their dreams and lives often stifled by the color of their skin. The Jim Crow laws, a set of oppressive policies, enforced racial segregation, and African Americans were victims of widespread discrimination. Their dreams and lives often stifled by the color of their skin. The Jim Crow laws, a set of oppressive policies, enforced racial segregation, and African Americans were victims of widespread discrimination. Their dreams and lives often stifled by the color of their skin. Yet in this dark period, a beacon of hope emerged, a man named Martin Luther King Jr. Born on January 15, 1929 in Atlanta, Georgia, Martin Luther King Jr. was destined for greatness. The son of a Baptist minister and a civil rights leader, young Martin was immersed in the struggle for equality from an early age. His father, Martin Luther King Sr., was a beacon of hope and resistance in a time of systemic injustice, and his influence on his son was profound. Martin's early life was shaped by the values of faith, community, and a commitment to justice.
In 1929, less than a lifetime after the end of slavery, Martin Luther King Jr. was born in Atlanta. His father and grandfather were preachers. They used language and music to educate the minds and elevate the spirits of their congregations. Encouraged to learn and express himself, King became an accomplished public speaker like his father. By the age of 14, he had moved quickly through school, skipping both the 9th and 12th grades, and entered Morehouse College, an all-black institution, at the age of 15. Before he graduated from college, he had already chosen his life's work and was ordained a minister when he was just 18.
His education was a testament to his thirst for knowledge and his unyielding spirit. After graduating high school at the tender age of 15, he went on to study at Morehouse College, where his father and grandfather had also studied. Here he decided to follow in his father's footsteps, studying theology and preparing himself for a life of service and leadership. Young King, armed with education and a deep faith, was ready to take on the world. In the mid-1950s, a spark was ignited that would transform Martin Luther King Jr. into a national figure. It was the Montgomery bus boycott, a pivotal moment in American history that first showcased King's leadership. The boycott, a response to the arrest of Rosa Parks, lasted for over a year, and it was King who emerged as the face of this powerful movement.
The year was 1955. King's first job as a minister was at the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama, just across the street from the Alabama State Capitol. Black bus riders who paid the same fare as whites were required by law to give up their seats to white riders and move to the back of the bus as the whites boarded. When all seats had been taken away by whites, the black riders had to stand. When a black woman named Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat, she was arrested.
We, the Negro citizens of Montgomery, have been engaged in a nonviolent protest against injustices and indignities experienced on city buses.
On Monday, December 5th, 1955, there were no black passengers on the buses of Montgomery. That night, a committee was formed to carry on the momentum of the one-day boycott. Martin Luther King was elected its president.
We go back to the buses, let us be loving enough to turn an enemy into a friend.
At the age of 26, in his first action as leader, King gave an electrifying speech calling for an active refusal to cooperate with what he deemed an evil system.
We will be able to emerge from the bleak and desolate midnight of man's inhumanity to man to the bright and glittering daybreak of freedom and justice.
In response to the repressive forces of segregation, King evoked the Christian doctrine of love. This meant maintaining compassion for the white people of Montgomery while fighting their discriminatory system.
Alabama state law requiring segregation of races on buses still stands.
For Dr. King, The key to victory would be in never resorting to violence. The white citizens of Montgomery, however, had a different agenda.
All public carriers operating in Alabama are hereby directed to strictly adhere to all present existing segregation laws in our state or suffer the consequences.
More and more blacks began carpooling to ensure the bus boycott would succeed.
We, the Negro citizens of Montgomery, Alabama, do now and will continue to carry on our mass protest.
His leadership style was unique, grounded in the principles of nonviolent resistance. He was influenced by the teachings of Mahatma Gandhi, and he believed that love and passive resistance could bring about social change.
At the age of 26, King received his PhD from Boston University. While he was in school, Martin Luther King studied the work of Mahatma Gandhi, who was leading India's fight for freedom from Great Britain. Gandhi knew that armed insurrection would justify British attack. His solution was nonviolent passive resistance, in which vast numbers of Indians boycotted British goods and disobeyed what they felt were unjust laws. Relentless, nonviolent mass confrontation eventually forced the British to abandon their claim to India. Martin Luther King saw that Gandhi's nonviolent approach to the struggle for freedom in India could work in the struggle for equal rights in America.
In the late 1950s, King took another significant step. He formed the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, an organization that played a crucial role in the civil rights movement. Its goal was to end segregation and discrimination against African Americans through nonviolent protest.
Throughout the late 1950s, King stood at the forefront of the movement.
We feel that we are right. We have a legitimate gripe, a legitimate protest.
Like many other black leaders, he was arrested numerous times for activities in violation of what were deemed repressive laws throughout the South. King would later write, "I was proud of my crime. It was the crime of joining my people in a nonviolent protest against injustice. It was the crime of seeking to instill within my people a sense of dignity and self-respect. It was the crime of desiring for my people the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It was above all the crime of seeking to convince my people that non-cooperation with evil is just as much a moral duty as cooperation with good."
And we feel also that one of the great glories of American democracy is that we have the right to protest far right. This is a non-violent protest. We are depending on moral and spiritual forces, using the method of passive resistance. Even if we have to receive violence, we will not return violence.
Late in 1958, King was stabbed in the chest by a deranged assailant as he autographed copies of his first book, Stride Toward Freedom.
The pathetic aspect of this experience is not the injury to one individual. It demonstrates that a climate of hatred and bitterness so permeates areas of our nation that inevitably deeds of extreme violence must erupt.
After a lengthy recovery, Martin and Coretta Scott King departed on a month-long visit to India in early 1959. King wrote of his visit that he left India more convinced than ever before that nonviolent resistance is the most potent weapon available to oppressed people in their struggle for freedom.
Then, in the summer of 1963, King gave his most famous speech. On the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, during the March on Washington, he shared his dream of a nation where people are judged by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. King's dream of equality and freedom resonated across America and the world. This dream, and the man who dared to share it, marked the rise of a leader who would forever change the course of history.
1960 was a presidential election year, and in John F. Kennedy, many African Americans saw a chance for the first meaningful government action in the cause of equal rights and equal justice. America's black leadership strongly supported Kennedy.
And I would say that there are some things that we must continue to do in order to make the American dream a reality and save our nation in this hour.
On Election Day, most groups were divided evenly between Kennedy and his opponent, Richard Nixon. Only black Americans voted overwhelmingly for JFK. Kennedy won, but only by an extremely narrow margin. However, the hoped-for comprehensive national civil rights legislation was slow in coming. President Kennedy and his brother Attorney General Robert Kennedy at first did not think new civil rights legislation was possible because Congress was conservative, like much of America, and would not support it. The events of the next 3 years would change the president's mind and the attitudes of millions of white Americans. In 1961, as the civil rights movement spread, more whites joined in demonstrations against discrimination. To fight segregation and travel between the states, groups of black and white freedom riders began traveling together by bus throughout the South, challenging discriminatory laws. Their actions were often met with white violence. In May 1961, King and his followers were trapped in a Montgomery church by white racists until freed by federal marshals under orders from Attorney General Robert Kennedy.
You've heard these people say now you've got to change the hearts of men. That's the only way you can solve it, and I guess that's true. Now, it may be true that morality cannot be legislated, but behavior can be regulated. I guess it is true that the law can't make a man love me. Religion and education must do that. But the law can keep him from lynching me, and I think that's pretty important too.
The federal government was beginning to react. In 1961, segregation was officially ended in interstate travel. Advances in civil rights were not without their ever-increasing cost in human lives. In 1962, when James Meredith was admitted by court order as the first black student of the University of Mississippi, riots occurred in which 2 people were killed. In June 1963, Medgar Evers, head of the Mississippi chapter of the NAACP, the oldest civil rights organization in America, was shot and killed outside his home. His alleged murderer was not brought to trial until 1993. But the pressure for change continued, and the pressure was never greater than in 1963. Early in the year, Dr. King and other black leaders decided to focus on what they called the most segregated big city in the United States, Birmingham, Alabama.
He could call out the state militia. He could call out the National Guard and kill hundreds and hundreds of innocent people and argue that they are inciting a riot. They know how to handle violence, but they proved over and over again that they don't know how to handle nonviolence.
The black leaders planned a highly visible demonstration of their demands for equality. On April 12, 1963, 2 weeks after the birth of his 4th child, Dr. King, Reverend Ralph Abernathy, and 1,000 others marched toward downtown Birmingham. The marchers were in deliberate violation of an order by Police Commissioner Bull Connor expressly forbidding demonstrations. The mass arrests began. As expected, King and Abernathy were arrested and jailed along with many others. King was held for 24 hours in solitary confinement until President Kennedy personally interceded with Birmingham officials. Never before was Dr. King's philosophy of nonviolence more effective, as millions of Americans began to realize that the blacks were being victimized by the laws of the land, rather than being protected by the law. Like other Americans, President Kennedy watched on television the familiar spectacle of police violence against Dr. King and his followers. For the upper-class president from New England, it was a shocking education in the realities of life for black America. Having witnessed the abuse of power by Alabama authorities to the humiliating images of American violence and injustice being spread throughout the world, President Kennedy had seen enough.
The events in Birmingham and elsewhere have so increased the cries for equality that no city or state or legislative body can prudently choose to ignore them.
Kennedy agreed to push landmark civil rights legislation through Congress.
We face, therefore, a moral crisis as a country and a people. It is a time to act in the Congress, in your state and local legislative body, and above all, in all of our daily lives. It is not enough to pin the blame on others. to say this is a problem of one section of the country or another, or deplore the facts that we face. A great change is at hand, and our task, our obligation, is to make that revolution, that change, peaceful and constructive for all. Those who do nothing are inviting shame as well as violence. Those who act boldly are recognizing right as well as reality. Next week, I shall ask the Congress of the United States to act, to make a commitment it is not fully made in this century to the proposition that race has no place in American life or law.
In June, Dr. King and civil rights leaders met with the president to announce plans for a march on Washington in support of the Civil Rights Act. President Kennedy thought such a move would be disastrous for the cause, but the leaders knew the march would draw hundreds of thousands of people. The historic March on Washington took place in August 1963. As King and the others predicted, enormous numbers, black and white, gathered to show the time had come to end the discriminatory treatment of black Americans.
As we struggle, we do not struggle alone. It's dark sometimes, it's difficult, particularly for those who are struggling in the Deep South, facing all of the violence and all of the suffering. That is something that consoles us along the way. We are convinced that our cause is right. I return to Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia, not in despair, not in bitterness. I return knowing that we are moving into a bright day of freedom.
King, one of the foremost fighters for civil rights, is one of many speakers who remind the gathering that this march must not be counted a final victory or defeat.
We, through our struggles, through our suffering, through our sacrifice, will be able to achieve the American dream. And this will be the day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, and God Almighty, we are free at last.
Despite facing immense challenges and threats, King remained steadfast in his pursuit of justice. In the early evening of April 4th, 1968, King's life was abruptly and tragically cut short. He was assassinated on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee. The nation was thrown into mourning, its collective heart heavy with the loss of a leader who had become the voice of change, of hope, of a dream for a better future.
King was criticized from many sides for his stand on the war. Major segments of the mainstream American press virtually wrote his obituary as a national leader. President Johnson, who was pursuing the war as vigorously as he'd pursued the Civil Rights Act, felt personally betrayed by King and by all of black America. But within 1 year of King's speech, the tide of public opinion had turned so strongly against the war that Lyndon Johnson decided not to run for a second term as president. Martin Luther King was arguably the most important and effective American leader to take a moral stand against our involvement in Vietnam. In late March 1968, Dr. King led a demonstration of 8,000 people in Memphis, Tennessee. This time, the demonstrators turned violent.
Somebody must have sense enough to meet hate with love. Somebody must have sense enough to meet physical force with soul force. And yet at the same time, win the hearts and souls of those who have kept these conditions alive. We've been trampled over so long. I know the temptation that comes to all of us. We've seen the viciousness of lynching mob with our own eyes. I understand why there are some who have been a little misguided and they've ended up feeling that the problem can't be solved within, and so they talk about racial separation rather than racial integration. I must say to them in patient terms that black supremacy is as dangerous as white supremacy.
Determined to show the world that nonviolence is not dead, King scheduled another march. Working with many of the factions involved in the earlier violence, King convinced them to participate without resorting to dangerous physical confrontation. On April 3rd, he delivered a speech that made reference to the war abroad and the war at home in the same terms. Men for years now have been talking about war and peace, but now no longer can they just talk about it. It is no longer a choice between violence and nonviolence in this world. It's nonviolence or non-existence. Dr. King went on to utter words that would be prophetic. We've got some difficult days ahead. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain, and I've looked over. And I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. And I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. A day later, on April 4th, 1968, Dr. King stepped out onto the balcony of his motel room in Memphis, where he had been meeting with Ralph Abernathy, Jesse Jackson, and others. From across the way, a single shot was fired. Martin Luther King fell dead, murdered at the age of 39. James Earl Ray was convicted of the murder of Martin Luther King. King was a man with extraordinary gifts. A dreamer with a vision of equality he shared so generously for the good of humanity. A hero of magnificent courage, eloquence, and inspiration. A father of 4 young children, a leader with a lifetime of yet untapped potential.
The pain of King's loss was deep, but his life was not in vain. His tireless efforts had led to significant strides in the fight for civil rights. Under his leadership, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed, outlawing segregation in public places and banning employment discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. This was a monumental step in the journey towards equality. A year later, in 1965, the Voting Rights Act was signed into law. This act prohibited racial discrimination in voting, thus enabling millions of African Americans to exercise their democratic right, unimpeded by the shackles of systemic racism. King's legacy extends far beyond these legislative victories. His nonviolent approach to activism, his powerful speeches, and his unwavering dedication to the cause of justice continue to inspire generations. The spirit of his dream has permeated every corner of society, encouraging us all to envision a world where people are judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. In honor of King's immense contributions, we celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. Day every year on the 3rd Monday of January. This day serves as a reminder of King's vision, his sacrifice, and the ongoing struggle for equality. We remember his words, his actions, his dream. Though King's life was cut tragically short, his dream lives on, inspiring millions to continue the fight for equality and justice. Thank you for tuning in to CLD Takes. For more videos such as this and the biographies, please subscribe to the channel and click on the bell to receive notifications for new videos. Till then, see you next time.